Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
And welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Tonight, we have Deacon Hayes of Well Kept Wallet, and he has what seems to be an extraordinary story of paying off a very large amount of debt in a relatively short amount of time. So if you are listening, this should be a pretty inspirational story. I know all of us have some sort of debt, so hearing about how you can pay off a big amount in a short amount of time, I think that's of interest to me. So it should certainly be of interest to you. Welcome to our show, Deacon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And let me introduce the rest of the Money Mastermind Show. We have Kyle Prevost of youngandthrifty.ca, Miranda Marquette of Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson. Oh man, it's been a long time. Let me say, we've had a bit of a break here, so maybe you don't notice it or not, but as far as when we release the shows, but it's been a while since we've done this, so I'm a little rusty here. Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, and Tom Drake of the Canadian Finance Blog, who we've kidnapped and kept in a basement there, if you're watching in video. So, Deacon, you seem to have an extraordinary story here. If I'm correct, you paid off about $52,000 in debt in about 18 months. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. My wife and I can't take all the credit.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Before we all get in trouble here, right? Tell us a little bit about that. Like, what got you into that debt, and how did you start to get out of that in so short a time?
Sure. So, I mean, the main catalyst was my wife and I getting married. And, you know, when you have a man and a woman inside a condo, you know, things start to happen. And I'm talking about, you know, money conversations, you know. And so
I hope so.
And so, you know, we were talking about, you know, our different backgrounds. You know, I came from one background, my wife came from another, and it was clear that we needed to kind of get on the same page and develop a game plan to tackle our finances. So the first thing that we did was, you know, put together a one-page spreadsheet that said, hey, what does it look like? And that's when we tallied up everything. We had like $18,000 car loan. I want to say about I'm going to mess up the math here, but the rest of it was student loans and credit card debt. And it was apparent that, okay, when we added up, it was 52 grand, and we knew we didn't want it to last forever. We wanted to make a change drastically, and we wanted to do it while we were young so that we could enjoy the rest of our lives. So that kind of led us on a journey to pay it off in the shortest amount of time possible, which in our case was 18 months.
Now, let me ask you, when you started looking at putting all this money together and figuring out what it is, was this after you got married, or did you have an idea of what each other's debt was before then? Like, at what time did you notice what this money was and how much it was?
You know, what's funny is there was this article on Business Insider where they had interviewed me, and I had seen this title for the first time, and it said how newlyweds got married and had no idea the debt they had. And they were talking about us. Like, we did not know ahead of time. Like, we knew after the fact, and it was a little bit late then, but no, it was apparent that we really needed to kind of have those conversations. So it wasn't until after we got married.
And what was that like, finding out from each other that both of you were in such debt? I mean, I can imagine, you know, maybe a student loan is something, it's not so much of a surprise, but other types of debt like car loans and credit card debt, I mean, I guess that could be a little bit of a shocker. Like, how did that feel once you found out about it?
Well, you know, it was pretty equal, so that made it a little bit easier to swallow, right? You know, my wife had more student loans, but then I had the car loan, right? You know, and then we both kind of had credit card debt at different degrees. So that really was kind of like, we're not going to play the blame game. It's like, hey, this is the reality of our situation. We got married. We're in this together. So, you know, it was just kind of more of an eye-opening, like, we need to make a change, because, you know, my parents had both filed bankruptcy separately. They got divorced. And then her parents, you know, they were in their mid-60s, and they really hadn't started saving for retirement yet. So we knew that we needed to kind of change the way that our family is going to go moving forward.
That's a pretty commendable way to go into it there. So how did you start to decide how you were going to actually pay everything off? Like, what order did you do it in? How did you know where to get the money from?
So I'm a simple guy. There's a lot of resources out there. I read a lot of financial books, and I was listening to some radio shows and such. And so the method that really stuck out to me was the debt snowball method, where we listed our debt smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rate. And what's funny? I took a personal finance class in college, and I was supposed to put together a plan for kind of the next 5-10 years. And part of that plan was actually the reverse, was the debt avalanche, right, where you pay off the highest interest rate first. So here I was like, this is what I learned in college was, do it from the interest standpoint. But then I realized, like, well, that's not how I operate, right? I really needed those small victories fast to give me momentum and to give me confidence to keep moving forward. So my wife and I, we came across that, thought, hey, that's perfect. That's for us. So we really just started tackling the small debts, $300 credit card here, medical bill there, and then, just kind of snowballed.
It's funny how, there's so much of a clinical sort of mathematical part to this whole personal finance thing, but really so much of it is really just psychological, isn't it?
Oh, so yeah, I mean, we're human beings, right? Like if we were robots, that avalanche makes sense 100% of the time. But because we're messy, because we're human beings, because we're all about psychology and behavior, I've coached and counseled hundreds, if not thousands of people, and it's just amazing to see the difference that snowball makes for people that are like, it's just a light bulb goes off. Like, I can do this. This makes sense. So there are people that do it that avalanche way, but they're really, they're engineers. They're people that are really good with math, and that works for them. But that was the method that we needed to do.
And I found that it's a good introduction to get that small thing out of the way, right? Once you get that, then you could switch around, then you can find other things. But having that, like you said, that victory early on, that really does help.
Yeah.
So where did you guys find the money to pay? I mean, that's a lot of money to pay off in a relatively short time.
So one of the things that we did is we kind of created a makeshift net worth sheet. And we realized that, okay, yeah, I had this $18,000 car loan, but my wife had a $5,000 car that was paid for, right? So I'm thinking, okay, let's shift some things around. What if we sold her car, sold my car, and then bought two cars for less than $5,000? And so that's exactly what we did. I bought a Honda Accord. It was like, I think, a 98 for my wife for $1,250. And she drove it for a few years. I mean, we put a little bit of money into it, but it's an older car, but it was nowhere near what we were paying in car payments. And then I bought a Lexus, but it was like a 96. So it was a Lexus ES300 for $2,200 or $2,500. So really we bought these used reliable cars, sold my brand new car, which is kind of an interesting story because it was upside down. So we had to come up with $1,000. But really that was one of the early decisions we made to kind of say, hey, we no longer have a $500 car payment because we got rid of this car. Now we can take that and start plowing that to our debt snowball.
I want to know why you got the Lexus and she got the Accord.
That's a really good question. So the funny thing is, I worked in this luxury wood flooring manufacturer, and so I was a sales rep. I was the only sales rep for the company, and we did $1 to $50 million homes. And so the owner of the company, he's actually the reason why I got this. I had the brand new car. He came into the office one day and he's like, Deacon, you can afford this. And he puts down this ad of a brand new Nissan Altima, and it was like $300 and something a month, but it really wasn't that after you kind of add everything up. But so I got this brand new car because of my boss. And so then I was like, okay, well, to appease him, I'm going to get somewhat of a luxury car. But granted, it was like 12 to 15 years old. So it's not like it was this shining piece of equipment. I mean, literally, you couldn't open the passenger door from the outside. You had to open it from the inside. Like, I had to get seat covers because all the seats were cracked. There's no AM radio. So back in the day, I liked to listen to AM radio. Now I'm more into hip hop. But, so that there were small sacrifices that had to be made for this luxury car.
One of the things that I think, because we're talking about, you're paying off $52,000 in debt, and we hear stories of people who are tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And one of the things that struck me is, like, well, I was a salesperson and I was going to these expensive homes, and it just makes me wonder how many of us end up in these huge debt situations because of we're trying to look apart. We're trying to look rich rather than actually engaging in the habits that will make us rich.
I totally can vouch for that. I mean, I think that was kind of the thing. It's kind of like the fake it till you make it type deal. But I mean, really, I was realistic of my 96 Lexus. I mean, it wasn't the greatest car in the world. So, it wasn't like I was really faking it. It wasn't like I had this Jaguar or something. But yeah, I think that we do. And that was part of like the new cars. I didn't need a new car. My entire life I drove used reliable cars. And so I just kind of bought into that lie of like, I needed this to be able to do my job.
I find it interesting.
Got a great,
sorry.
Got a great quote from Thomas J. Stanley on this topic right here. I just have to jump in because
go for it, because I was thinking that too. But go ahead.
Oh, okay. Quote is this: "It's the true financial goal of most Americans is not to be rich, not to be affluent, not to be wealthy. The true goal is to appear affluent and seem wealthy." So, it really kind of goes down to that idea. So many of us are getting these huge debt holes because we're trying to portray this image of success, when the reality is not that.
Yeah, it's like, I think in the book Millionaire Next Door, they talk about, if I'm getting it all correct, it's the plumber that has their own business that could go around in the beat up pickup truck, that has a better shot at building wealth than, the high-priced lawyer that has to look like they're driving the expensive Mercedes and has to have the $1,000 suits, because they have to put on that appearance all the time. So that's interesting.
One thing you didn't talk about too was the sacrifice they had to make in order to reach this goal. Was that really an important part of this? Having to get rid of that nice car, maybe having to cut back in other areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing so this Lexus, right? It didn't have a cup holder, at least, so that was like one thing I'm like, gosh, this is a basic necessity in a car that you have a cup holder. So like, I want to say it was 6 months in and I press on the dash and sure enough, this cup holder pops out. And I'm like, I've been driving this car for 6 months and I had no idea that it had a cup holder. So that was a sacrifice that I made. But other than the cars, I mean, there was a lot of things that we decided, when you're young, you get invited out to do stuff a lot, go out on the weekends, go to restaurants and bars and things like that. And we just realized that we weren't in a financial position to really do that. We needed to, eat in, and we might have ate out occasionally, but it was like Chili's 2 for $20, right? Like we would go out, we would be out of the door with tip and everything for like $25, and maybe that's like once a month, So, cut my gym membership, cut our cable, like cut, anything that was kind of unnecessary. They were like, we don't really need this during this time.
And I think though that that brings up the question of how feasible is this for everyone, for everybody to try and do. It's one thing if you're a young couple and you're on board and you're doing it together, but what happens if you have like 3 teenagers, or if you have a partner who's not on board and who doesn't want to make quite the deep sacrifices? And I think that's where you kind of start running into trouble, and you have to start tweaking, and looking at the feasibility of paying off that much debt in that short of a period of time.
So I think this is where, my grandpa used to say, I don't want to hear excuses. I want results, And so this is where I tell people, if you want the results, it's going to take sacrifice, and everybody in the entire world can do it. And people in the United States, by all means. I mean, if you were to go to, I think it's like globalrichlist.com or something like that, and you can type in what you make a year. Like if you live in America, you're in the top 95% of wealth in the world. So, I have this series called Debt Success Stories. I featured probably 50 people or 50 families. I mean, there was a couple that they moved to a house in the hood with their 2 little kids because they inherited the house from a relative, and they had no mortgage payment anymore. And they were able to pay off all their consumer debt, and they're completely debt free, and they love it. Now it's kind of like their thing. They call themselves hood rich, There was a lady that she had cancer, and she paid off debt while she was getting chemotherapy. I mean, like, I've just had so many people that, like, when you say enough is enough and you're willing to make that sacrifice, it's totally possible.
Did you find that being married helped get out of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, so here's what I'll say for our situation. Is we're dual incomes, no kids, right? Dinks, as they call it in the finance world. And so, my wife was a teacher and I was in sales. But I will tell you this, like back in the day, we were starting off in our careers. So teachers don't make that much. Sales, I was 100% commission. I'm getting started. So I want to say maybe we're around 70 grand. So if you were to kind of say over that 18-month period, what's that? $105,000 coming in. We paid off 52 grand, and then obviously you have to factor in taxes and all the debt payments and all those things. So it wasn't an easy feat. It's not like we were making 150 grand while we were doing this.
I just find that interesting because I think sometimes, it's tough living on your own salary and just trying to get by, and sometimes having that extra income, like you said. It's like you almost need to partner up in order to really just kind of kill off your debt sometimes. But you have to have the right person also that's willing to go on board with it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's key. So, so if you're listening to this, it's time to get married and find someone that's a breadwinner. No. But it was definitely helpful in my case.
Such a gold digger.
Yeah, those teacher salaries.
Now, you guys, you mentioned you have dual incomes and everything. I may have missed it, but did you say you were also working part-time during this time, or was it just your full-time jobs?
So at the end, I decided to pick up some part-time work because I had this, what I thought was a unattainable goal of 18 months. And once we started getting towards the end, I'm like, well, this is possible if I get a second job, because then I knew that I was going to get some extra income coming in on top of my sales gig. And so I decided to deliver pizzas. Now, when I was in like high school and college, I was probably in college. Yeah, I was college. Delivering pizzas, it was glory, right? Like I'm listening to my music. I'm driving down the streets with one hand on the wheel. Like it was just the life. And I get to this pizza joint and literally they have me cleaning like grease traps and like I'm peeling potatoes and I'm like, what did I sign up for? Like this is not as glorious as I remember. So I did have some part-time work towards the end of the 18 months there.
So I'm kind of interested in the psychology of what makes you want to do this, because I'm going to be super honest here. There is no way I would work 2 jobs and like cut back that much in my life. I don't care how much debt I was in. There was no way I would ever do that. So I'm just kind of interested in kind of your mindset. What is your motivation there? What motivates you to do that? Because I have a hard time picturing myself having that. I have fire for some things, but that is not one of them. We all know how much I hate sacrifice. So what pushes you? What's your motivation? What was your motivation to keep going with that?
So for us, we had a couple of things that we wanted. One is financial freedom. I eventually wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur now, been for almost 4 years. But the reality is I couldn't do that if we were in debt. The amount of payments, if you were to add up credit cards, car payments, student loans, I mean, we're probably paying like $1,000 to $1,500 a month outside of mortgages, and just debt payments. And so we knew that was one of the building blocks to having that freedom to be able to quit my 9 to 5 and work for myself. Another thing is travel the world. Like we love to travel internationally, and so it was our goal to kind of get rid of this debt. So gosh, if you got an extra $1,000 a month, that's 12 grand a year. I mean, you could do some pretty nice traveling. So we just valued different things, right? Like we just decided, hey, we wanted to go to Singapore where her college roommate lived. And so we went to Singapore, Hong Kong, and Indonesia when we got out of debt. We wanted to go to London and Paris because I'd never been. My wife had, but I was like, I want to go. You got to go. So we did that. But we would not have been able to do those things had we not been debt free.
What kind of student loans did you have, if you don't mind my asking? I mean, were they private loans or were they federal loans? Like, I mean, what was the impetus? I mean, I hear you on the financial freedom, but a lot of people think, okay, it's a 30-year loan, maybe it's a low rate. Like, what was it that made you want to pay that part off?
So they were federal loans, and believe it or not, I mean, they're even higher today. Not our student loans,
yeah.
but I mean, it's just ridiculous when I look at people's student loans, and I'm like, oh my, that's higher than I mean, I can't believe it's like 7-8% for some people for regular federal loans. I don't remember what mine are. Let's say they're 5%. It didn't matter because for me it was I don't have to make a payment to the government ever again outside of the IRS for debt. And so it's one less thing I have to worry about. And people like to use the financial argument, right? I mean, I studied business in college. Like I understand other OPM, other people's money. And they say, well, why would you pay off your 5% student loans when you can get 10% in the stock market? And I'll say, hey, well, were you alive for 2008? I mean, there was a long period of time where you were not making 10% in the stock market. You heard of the lost decade where there was basically 0% return for 10 years. I mean, so it's not guaranteed. So for me, paying off debt is guaranteed return of my money, and that's why I did it.
And I think that really speaks to kind of the psychology because I have a 1.9% interest rate on my student loans, and I refuse to pay them off early. I just straight up refuse. I actually think Deacon and I might have had this conversation, but
I think we did. But
yeah, I think we did. But yeah, I just refuse just because I am putting that money into the stock market, and even during the worst of it, I was still making a better return on my investments than the 1.9% I was paying on my student loans. So, but I think just speaks to your psychology because to me, I'm comfortable with carrying that kind of debt, but not everybody is, and so in the end, you kind of have to decide which kind of debt you're comfortable with and how long you're willing to make those payments and kind of do that.
I think whatever motivates you to take a second job delivering pizzas, you should do that. If you care enough about investing in the future to take a second job, invest in the future. If you care enough about paying down your debt, if you care enough to put that extra work in and actually, whether it's paying down debt or investing, if you care enough to earn that money and do something productive with it, then do that, man. Like whatever, that's a pretty incredible story, Deacon, to just put pedal to the metal and just make no excuses. And I don't think many of us are willing to look in the mirror and do that, frankly.
Oh, I'm not. So good for you.
The thing I'm hearing, Deacon, when I hear your story is just that it gives you a lot more freedom when you don't have those obligations sitting there in the background. You have the freedom to go on trips if you want to travel. You can save more money. The options are just open wide for you when you have that obligation off the slate.
Oh yeah, and I always look at opportunity cost, right? Like what does that cost me to have those debt payments? And so if we were just to say like on that $1,000, I mean a majority of that's interest, right? So let's just say it's $500 a month in interest. Well, over a year that's $6,000. Well, I mean, people complain about I can't put my kids through college because I don't have money. Well, that's because you have a car payment. I can't invest for the future because I don't have money. Well, that's because you bought a house bigger than you could afford and you have more debt than you really need to be carrying, And so I think a lot of times like we justify our debt, but we have to realize that's taking away something else, right? Like saying yes to debt in one area is saying no to these opportunities over here, whether it's travel, putting your kids through college or whatever. And so it's really for people, if they're listening, like, what are your priorities? Write them down. And if it's having debt, all right. I mean, I would say that's not something that most people would want to really prioritize. It would be, hey, I want to do all these other things,
YOLO.
YOLO, baby.
Yeah, and to tell the truth, I mean, I know I'm coming from a place of where I'm really kind of privileged, where I can say, well, I can make my student loan payments, my $200 a month on my student loan payments, and still have plenty of money left over to do lots of other stuff. And that's part of it, just luck, because of the time I went to school and the low interest rate I was able to get. Somebody coming out of school with the same amount of student loans that I had is not paying 1.9%, and they're not paying $200 a month. They're also much higher.
It speaks to your different situations too, and being aware of what those financials are too. I mean, a lot of people have all this debt out there, and they're not even sure what those rates are or what they are, and who they're paying the money to. They just know they get a bill and they have to pay it. Right? So yeah, it sounds like if you've got 5, 6, 7% versus the 1.9, that's a big determining factor on whether you pay it off too.
Absolutely. And one other thing that I think people miss out on is, okay, if you get the $200 student loan payment, and I'm just using Miranda as an example, are you then, now that you're saying that that's, okay, instead of, you're going to use that money, put it in the stock market. So are you putting an additional $2,400 a year into the stock market now that you have this $200 loan, right? $200 a month payment. I mean, that's what I think a lot of people don't do that though, right? They say like, oh, I can get this much in the stock market, so I'm just going to borrow the money over here and invest that money. But do people really invest it?
Right.
And that's where they got to have a gut check.
Oh, that's for sure too. And I think you make a really good point there is a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to leverage this and, like you were saying, other people's money. But what are they really doing with that money? And, I mean, I have my retirement account. I have my travel fund. I've got, my emergency fund. All that stuff is taken care of. And that's all done with extra money that I'm not putting toward paying down my student loans. So, I mean, like you said, is what are you doing with it?
In Miranda's case, though, you're actually making that decision to invest in.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people say they got that $200 payment. They're like, well, the interest is low, so I'm not going to pay it back. But then they end up blowing all the money. And then they've got nothing to show for it, just a bunch of junk.
It's like they end up robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's like, okay, I paid this off, but now this money's really just going to go to something else that I'm either going to borrow against or to balance something else out. But the money's not really going somewhere that'll grow for them.
But really, we're just trying to make Miranda feel better about the fact that she doesn't mind being in debt.
No sacrifices.
That's right, no sacrifices. No, but I think this also brings up a point when we're talking about, well, what are you doing with the money? What happens, Deacon, when you actually pay off all that debt, and now it feels like, oh my gosh, they've come, the big days come. I have all this extra money. I paid off all this debt. What do you do with all that money? Do you run out and spend it? Do you have to make a plan for it? I mean, that's something you've got to handle.
Oh yeah. And so, our thing was we never were savers. That's why we had debt, because we never saved up money to buy anything. And so we realized that, well, first I want to say this. So when we paid off our debt, it didn't really sink in, right? Like we were used to, for all of our lives, making these payments. And so we look at our bank account and there's like an extra grand in there, and we're like, that's weird, And then the next month there's another extra grand. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is actually real, So, at that point it was like, okay, we need to save up. And, people say 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. And I was like, I've never, let's just say our expenses were $3,000 a month. I mean, that's 18 grand. Like, I just couldn't fathom that. So I was like, okay, let's just do 3 months. Let's make a very small goal in our eyes and have $9,000, just put that much in savings. So that was kind of our next step. So we paid off the debt. Now we're like, hey, let's put some money in savings, and now let's beef up our, the amount that we're putting in retirement. And then on top of that, we have what I call a countdown fund, what's also known as a sinking fund, where we put $300 a month every month into a travel fund so that we could do these international trips I was telling you about.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
We're all just thinking about travel.
Yeah, I know. Like, I'm a huge fan of the travel fund. That's my thing. I do the same thing. I'm always saving for the next trip. And I actually ended up using a combination. Well, right now we're using a travel fund where we put a certain amount of money into it each month so that we can go on a Viking River cruise next summer. And then
with Vikings?
Yeah, because I want to. But then I realized when I was looking at everything, I looked at Digit and I realized that automatically, without even thinking about it, Digit had saved me enough money to pay for my trip across Canada next year, this summer that's coming up. So,
Wow.
So I'm like, oh, it works for me.
It's the power of small amounts, right?
Right.
There you go.
So, Deacon, we're getting towards the end here, and we like to finish up our shows with a final word from everybody. So we're going to go around and just kind of sum up what our thoughts are on the subject. So, Tom, tell us your final thoughts on paying off big amounts in a small amount of time.
Well, one thing I liked that Deacon said that we didn't really touch on was how he had an 18-month goal, and that kind of led him towards getting the pizza delivery job. we've talked about goals before, but I think that probably helped you quite a bit, because really if your goal was simply, I'm going to pay off this amount without any kind of timeline there, you can kind of just pay it off slowly. So certainly set a goal when you're trying to pay off this. Make it realistic. You can't pay it off in a month maybe, but a good realistic goal and do what you have to do to make it.
Yeah, it seems like it really made a sense of urgency in how to do it. Peter, what's your final thoughts?
Well, if you're going to be going down this road of paying off that debt as fast as Deacon did, I think you really have to be ready to make it happen. You have to be ready to have the rubber hit the road and actually sit down and start planning and actually doing it. Now, I like a quote that I heard Deacon give on another podcast. It says, some people want it to happen, some wish it would happen, and others make it happen. And that was Michael Jordan. So really, you really have to be ready to sit down and actually do the work, make some sacrifices, get organized, and be dedicated to making this goal happen. But sit down and think about your goals, about why you are making it happen, and with those goals, it'll be a lot easier, I think.
Miranda, what's your final word?
Yeah, I think just like what we were talking about, it goes back to priorities, what Deacon was talking about, what really matters to you and what do you want to have happen in your life, and figure that out. And once you know that and you're committed to that, then you can start making changes and start making a plan.
Kyle, your final word?
I guess my final word is simply as inspiring as Deacon's story is, if that sort of sacrifice doesn't suit you, if you don't think you're ready for that, try very hard not to go into debt. I know that's easier said than done, but that's a reality, and Deacon fought and made his new reality. If that fight doesn't appeal to you, try not to get yourself into that hole.
Sounds good. And Deacon, if you'll close out the final word?
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're in kind of a similar situation to where we were, no, like we were just average people. Like I might sound like I know what I'm talking about now, but back then I knew nothing, right? Like I was just piecing this together as I went. So this is totally possible for you, if this is something you want to do. And so I just encourage you to kind of give it all you got. Use resources that we talked about, like the debt snowball. I've got a debt elimination form that's free that kind of helps you use the debt snowball and tell you how long it's going to take you to get out. There's all sorts of stuff out there. And so I really encourage you to just not wait, not procrastinate, but take action now.
I love that part of your story because that's what I love hearing. There's so many people think that you have to have some sort of expertise in this in order to make it happen. You have to find somebody else. But really, like we're all just sort of starting off that way, right? And we could all make this happen. We just have to find a place to start and do it. Deacon, thank you so much. For those people that are out there, can you tell them a little bit about Well Kept Wallet and where they can find you and what you're all about?
Sure. So Well Kept Wallet was started as a way to document our journey out of debt. And so it's a website called wellkeptwallet.com. And I've got some free resources on there. If you go to my resources page, the debt elimination form, a starter budget form, like pretty much everything you need to just get started. Because I wanted to make it easy for people, right? Like there's so much stuff to sift through. And so really it's kind of my dedication to get you from where you are to where you want to be when it comes to your career, money, and lifestyle. And so that is what Well Kept Wallet's all about. And I'd love to see anybody over there and help them out any way I can.
So definitely go out there, check out Well Kept Wallet and check in on what Deacon's up to. Deacon, thank you again for sharing your story and your inspiration with all of us. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening and watching. And until next week, be good with your money. Good night.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Google+.